Hello Flatlanders, let's talk about gauges today. Alrighty, we're here in my little car. On the dash, we see the set of gauges I see on my car. See, it's got all this great information on it. It's in park right now. Gas gauge is showing full. Airbag's off on the other side. I'm not strapped in. It's on eco mode. Here's some stuff where the average speed, the drive time, you know, what my cruising range is, outside air temperature. What I'm getting at is, this is a totally different gauge cluster than, say, a Peterbilt. Alright, so here we are in truck 9. We got your standard gauges in these trucks. You got the voltage here at the top, up here. Then there you have your coolant gauge, and you have your oil pressure. This measures how much your alternator's putting out, and it should be up in here somewhere. This is your coolant temperature. That measures how hot your engine coolant is, and then that should be up in here somewhere when it's operating, when it's all warmed up. Now down here, this is your oil pressure. Now that should be up in between here and about here, okay? Right in that big wedge right there. Your RPM gauge, that tells you how many revolutions per minute your engine is spinning. We all know what the speedometer does. And up here we have your fuel gauge. It says empty now because I don't have the key in this truck right now. Then we have your air gauges. That tells you how much air pressure is in the primary and secondary air tanks. See on that one top one it says prime air and then sec air on the bottom. Okay, moving over. We have a couple gauges here that you wouldn't see otherwise on other vehicles. At the top, right up here, you have your oil temperature. Down here we have an air application gauge. So when you step on this brake pedal, apparently it doesn't have any air in it, it'll actually make this raise up, and depends on how hard you're pushing on the pedal. Up here we have a suspension load. All right, that tells you how much air pressure is in the airbags of the truck. And this over here, trans temp, that's how hot your transmission's running. Here, we're in a Mack truck. Here we have coolant temperature, the oil pressure. There's the old familiar voltage for your alternator. We're going to go over here. We see your RPM gauge, your speedometer, and we have air pressure. Now this air pressure gauge, you'll notice it has two needles on it. Green is for the primary tank, while the orange is for the secondary tank. Then we move over down here, get your fuel gauge down here, and down further you got a transmission temperature gauge. We have a Volvo gauge cluster. So up here in the corner, that right there is going to be a turbo pressure, and then underneath it down here, that'll be your engine temperature, and then further down here, that's going to be your oil pressure. Okay, right there. Then this right here, that's going to be your diesel exhaust fluid. Yeah, right here. Should be no lower than this red mark right there. Okay, and that's 1/8 of a tank. Now over here, we have our ever-present fuel gauge. We have an application gauge like in the Peterbilt. And we have our two primary and secondary air gauges over here. Here we have a gauge cluster from a Freightliner Cascadia. Up here we have the oil pressure, engine coolant temperature, RPMs, miles per hour. Up here we have a fuel gauge, and then this right here will be your diesel exhaust fluid gauge right here. And you don't want it any lower than that last bar down there. Primary air tank, secondary air tank,